Hello everyone, welcome back to the Final Tackle podcast. Roll the intro.
So whether you're on the cricket ground, line park or the bush, you still gotta run, you still gotta tackle when the scrums have got the same push. You give it some, you give some more, and you really give your all. Playing rugby league football, it's the greatest game of all.
And now here's a quick word about our sponsors.
This episode is sponsored by Leeds RLFC Stickers. They are an England-based sticker company specialising in Leeds Rhinos Super League stickers. They are 100% quality guaranteed with regular new design releases. Head over to their Instagram, give them a follow and DM them for prices and much more. They have excellent prices. They also ship internationally. I go through them for all of my Leeds Rhinos stickers merch. We are also currently in talks of designing and releasing a Final Tackle exclusive design, so be sure to follow them and us on Instagram for updates on that. Their Instagram is LeedsRLFC_stickers. It will be linked in the description of this episode on YouTube, Spotify, Podbean, our Facebook, Instagram, and more. This episode is also sponsored by the Grange Hotel in Wyoming, New South Wales, Australia. They have quality food, $12 schnitties with almost any gravy that you can think of. I personally love the pepper gravy that they do on the schnitties for $12 there. They also show every single game of the NRL live on the big screen, so go over there, pour yourself a schooner of beer with your mates, order a snooty with your mates as well, and have a cracker of a time watching the footy on the big screen at the Grange. Their Facebook will be linked in the description of this episode and on our Facebook bios and everything else for our social medias as well. This episode is in partnership with the Rugby League Away Day. It is an Instagram-based Salford City and Super League news outlet. They focus on the Super League Women's at the moment. For all of your Super League Women's and more news, head over to their Instagram. It is first founded in 2017 by a former Salford City under-19 academy player. Their Instagram is Rugby League Away Day.
I just want to give a quick shout out to Danny McMaster, the originator of our intro song, who has been kind enough to let us use a bit of his chorus for our intro from now until whenever we decide to go with a new intro. Be sure to go and head over to his Instagram or his Twitter for more comedy gold with his songs, his impersonations, his impressions, and everything in between. They will be linked in the video on YouTube and also in the Spotify episode as well. Anyway, everyone, I am joined by, in my opinion, a future immortal, Golden Boot winner, Parramatta Eels legend, 4-time grand final winner with Parramatta Eels, Brett Kenny. Thank you for joining us here, mate.
And it's a pleasure.
All right, let's get stuck into it. The first question is, you made your debut for Parramatta in 1980. What was that like for you?
Well, I guess in a lot of ways it was a bit of a surprise. I was actually trialling back then for the junior representative team at Parramatta. It was called President's Cup, which was under 21s, and we had a trial game against some of the guys that were looking to play grade and make the under 23s. And after that trial, I got a phone call from Ron Fernley, who was the brother of Terry Fernley, and he asked me if I'd like to come over and try out for grade. So I obviously said yes, I'd love to do that, and went through all the different trial games and so forth, and then got graded in 1980, as you said, and was very fortunate to play first grade that same year.
Oh, wow, that's actually... Wow, they don't really do those trial things anymore, do they, for the NRL?
No, it's look, I tend to think it was probably a lot easier back when I started. You know, you had those opportunities, as I said, to play in a number of trial games. I think, every weekend for probably 5 weekends or 6 weekends in a row, we had a trial game before they made final selections on a squad. So it was, I think, a lot easier then. But nowadays, it seems to be that they just look at the way you perform at club level against the opposition that you come up against, and make a decision from there as to whether they think you'd be capable of playing at a higher level, obviously at grade level, and that's the way it's done. So sometimes it makes it a little difficult. Yep. Some guys could get under the radar and not be noticed and that, but I guess that's the way it is at the moment.
Yeah, unfortunately. Talking about going up against players, you played against, honestly, the synonymous king of State of Origin, Wally Lewis. In the 17 games you played for New South Wales, 12 of those were against Wally. and you actually ended up having an advantage. You won 8 of those 12 encounters against him, and Wally only won 4. What was it like having that, winning record sort of thing against an immortal?
Well, I guess it is a good thing to have. I guess as you say, Wally Lewis is an immortal, and I was able to have a winning record against him playing for New South Wales. But of course, it was more than just me, and it was more than just Wally. There were 12 other players in both those sides. So while it's nice to have people say, well, when you played 5'8", we won more games than we lost against Queensland, and in particular Wally Lewis. But yeah, there was other players in that team that played a big part in us winning those games. So I'm not happy to take the rap and everything. The reality is, it was 12 other players, or actually probably 13 other players, 14 other players actually that played a big part in those results.
Exactly, as they say, it takes a team sort of thing. Following into that question, you had numerous long-standing records at the Eels as club records, such as most tries in a season, most club games for the Eels. They have now since been, beaten because there's newer players and whatnot. What do you reckon was the record you're the most proud of at the Eels, as in a club record?
Well, I guess probably the most games would have been the one because, look, it's a tough sport, and to back up week in, week out and play, it was always going to be difficult to be able to actually hold a record at some stage. To have the most games played was probably something, that I was pretty proud of. I always thought it would more than likely get beaten. But it was good to have that record for a little while.
Yeah, no, that's actually really awesome. And I agree with you. It takes a lot to withstand one game, let alone over 200 that you played. Especially given that it was a totally different era at the time that you played, and it was and I don't mean to put the current version of the game into disrepute, but it was a much tougher, much more stronger, much honestly, again, like anyone's game back then. Next question is, during your time in the NRL, you played for club, state, and nation. Which level was your proudest achievement, and which one was the toughest?
Well, look, when you play for your country, that's obviously the ultimate in any sport, and it was no different for me. I was fortunate enough to be able to get selected to play for Australia, and in 1982 was the first time I represented Australia and went away on the Kangaroo Tour and played for them right up until the end of the 1987 season. So obviously, that was something that's very memorable. But I guess when you look at Origin and you look at Test match football, you're sort of playing with guys, obviously, from other clubs and other states, but you're together more likely for a week before you play, and then that might happen on 3 occasions throughout the year where, when you're playing at club level, you're with the guys from probably late October, early November, right through till you make the grand final the end of September.
Yeah.
So it's like you're being with a family, and to be able to play in a grand final and win a grand final with those guys is something very, very special. As I said, playing for your country is the ultimate in any sport, but it is a very special occasion when you're able to win a grand final with those guys that you've been together with for almost 12 months.
Yeah, no. And speaking of grand finals, you are a former player of the Parramatta Eels and part of the team that won all 4 of the Parramatta Eels grand finals. Which one is your proudest achievement? The 86, the first one, or the 3-peat?
Oh, look, I obviously the first one against Newtown. I mean, a couple of reasons. One, it was Parramatta's first premiership year. I was very fortunate, to be able to say, well, I never played in a grand final in junior football, and the first time I ever played in a grand final was a first grade rugby league final, and it was against Newtown, and we won. So, and I scored a couple of tries. So that was pretty special. And as I said before, it was always good to play to win grand finals, and I guess, but to choose one of those 4 that we won, I guess number 1 would be 1981 and number 2 would be 1986 because of the fact that, we were able to send out two of Parramatta's greatest ever players, and Mick Crannan and Ray Price. When they retired, they were able to retire winning a premiership.
Speaking of Ray Price, just as a little bit of a promo, the Legends of League tournament is in November 16th at McDonald Jones Stadium. Everyone get there. I will be there, and I'll be interviewing as many players as I possibly can. And also, Ray Price has been announced as the Parramatta coach for that day. Be sure to get down there, grab yourself some autographs, meet and greet some old players that you used to go and watch as a kid or even as an adult. Now, circling back into grand finals. In the 86 grand final, you had 2 tries controversially disallowed. Do you think in your heart, even nowadays, etc., that they were tries or not, sort of thing?
Well, at the time, like days, even weeks after the grand final, I still thought that I'd scored at least the first try.
Yep.
The second one, I wasn't too sure about it. I realised that I had sort of, I guess in a way, I was grounded before the try line, and then I sort of lifted myself up and over the top of it.
So somewhat of a double movement sort of thing?
Yeah, probably, yeah. So, but the first one I thought was definitely a try. But when I was working for Fox Sports for a while there, commentating on some of the NRL games, and they actually showed me some footage. And obviously with the more modern technology, they were able to slow it down a lot better than they used to back in 1986. And, of course, when you have a look at it, you can see there's a slight gap between the ball while it's on the ground. The point of the ball is actually touching the ground. And the other end of the ball, there was a gap between it and my hand. So, in actual fact, Mick Stone was right when he awarded no try. And it makes you wonder whether or not video or the video bunker is necessary, because he was proven to be 100% right, even when they used the video.
Yeah, and obviously it was controversial at the time purely because of the technology. There wasn't so much of being able to slow it down, and everyone at the field on the day, the fans and whatnot, would have seen it in the high speed that it was, not being able to slow it down, thinking, oh, that's a try safe as houses sort of thing.
Yeah, and look, obviously the fans and even the players, at the time it's a grand final, it was the first try scored in the game, or would have been the first try scored in the game, and you're hoping that, well, yes, it is a try, that he's awarded the try, and when he didn't, obviously a lot of people were disappointed, and I was often asked after the game, why didn't you stand up and complain about it? And I said, well, it was pointless doing that. The referee had already made his decision, and the Bulldogs are up on the 20-metre line taking the tap for the restart. So,
and
it was pointless
how the game went. Yeah,
it'd be pointless me standing in goal saying, "Hang on a minute, I think it was a try." It was. But as I said, it was ruled no try, and he was proved to be 100% correct.
Yeah, and we've got a few more questions before we head into the fans' questions. Who was the prankster at the Eels during your time there?
Probably we all didn't mind having a bit of a practical joke. I think Paul Taylor was probably the one that was the real prankster. We used to do a few things and that to each other at the various stages of training and so forth. But Paul Taylor was probably the prankster as far as the players were concerned. And Ron Massey, who was Jack Gibson's assistant, he was quite a bit of a prankster himself. And I remember we had Bob O'Reilly was playing. It was back in 1981, and I think it was the Bear was coming up for the weekend's game. Was a bit of a highlight for him, because I think it was going to be his 150th or something like that, first grade game for Parramatta.
Oh wow!
So obviously a special occasion. Well, so what they did just before training, they decided to. This was on the Saturday morning. They presented the Bear with a watch. And they got Mick Crannan to actually make the presentation. Mm-hmm. When the Bear got the watch, he was sort of overcome a bit, He really didn't know what to say. And with that, Ron Massey walked over to him, grabbed the watch and said, "You can't even be thankful for these guys, what they've done for it." Throws the watch on the floor and stamps on it, and got it all shattered. And the Bear was shattered himself. He struggled to train for that morning. And after training, we have a barbecue, and so at the barbecue they called him over and said, "Look, we want to make another presentation to you. This is actually the real watch. The other one was one they bought from Paddy's Market. So it cost them $10. So they explained to him what had happened, and give him the real watch. So, Ron Massey was a bit of a
setup.
prankster as well.
Far out. One last question before we head to the fans' questions. With the 2019 season all but done, it's down to the grand final. Who is your tip for the grand final win, the Raiders or the Roosters?
I'll tip the Roosters.
Yep.
Only because I think they've got a quality side right across the park. Their two halves have been playing very well. They've got a lot of experience as far as grand finals are concerned.
Yes, for sure.
But in saying that, it wouldn't surprise me. The Raiders played very well in the final. Their defence has been outstanding, and defence does win a lot of games. And it wouldn't surprise me if they're able to beat the Roosters. But I just think that experience from last year, and the fact they've got Cooper Cronk at halfback, and Hargraves comes back into the side, I really think that their experience will be enough to get them through.
I agree. I'm not necessarily a Raiders bandwagon sort of fan, but even earlier on in the season, around round 10-ish, I even said on the podcast and whatnot, keep an eye out for the Raiders, everyone. They're coming, and look what they've achieved. They've got to the grand final. I personally hope that the Raiders win, but again, I think the Roosters are going to win it. They're going to be the first team since the Broncos 92-93 to get the double. And I think they'll win comfortably between 4 to 8 points sort of thing. Like you said, with the experience of the players, most of the team was there last year, and also a majority of the team was there in 2013. A few other players have also had grand final experience, whether it's losses or wins, such as Brett Morris. And you just can't go past them. But like you also said, I wouldn't be surprised if the Raiders pull an upset win if their defense holds strong. Got some questions now from fans. David Armstrong asks, do you think the current Eels team has what it takes to A, get to a grand final, and B, to win a grand final?
Oh, look, at the moment, I think, they probably need a bit more time together. Mm-hmm. I think that showed this year. While they finished fifth in the competition, I really don't think, when you look at the sides that were below them, you start to wonder whether the competition was that hard. But look, when you look at Parramatta versus Brisbane, Brisbane had 58 points scored against them in the semi-final. You start to wonder how many about the teams that have finished in the bottom half of the 8 or the bottom half of the competition. But I just think they need a bit more time together. Maybe they can get a few more experienced players, in particular in the forwards.
Yep.
It might help them. I wouldn't say that they could win a competition within the next 2 years, maybe. But I think the biggest thing for them is if they can finish in the top 8 every year for the next 2 or 3 years, it might give themselves a good chance to at least get to a grand final. And I think, looking at them, they're probably a side that needs to be in a grand final first and lose one before they'll win one.
Yep, that is an old NRL adage that you've got to lose one to win one. Luckily for you, that wasn't the case. Your first grand final and you won it.
Exactly.
Next question is from Bob Sunderland, and he asks, would you consider coaching the Eels juniors, such as their reserve grade, like the Wenty Magpies, etc., and thoughts about the wrestling in today's game? And he thinks it can be stopped. How do you want it to be stopped, if you want it to be?
The first question, I actually did coach at Wendy. In 2010, I coached Wentworthville in the reserve grade.
Yep.
And got to the semi-finals. I think for those people that can remember, in 2010, the first grade didn't make the 8. The under-20s ran last. So we were the only team from Parramatta to make the semi-finals.
Oh, far out.
And unfortunately, for whatever reason, I was never really told, but they didn't want me coaching there the following year. So I had the opportunity to coach, and I'd like to think that I did, a reasonably good.
Well, you got him to the semi-finals, so that's better than nothing.
Yeah, so to answer the question, I would love to be involved again with the club, whether it be in a coaching role, whether it be an ambassador type role, to help out, do different various things around the club, and maybe come over and help out with a bit of coaching with some of the individual players, things like that. But certainly would love to be involved again. I'm sure. I know there's quite a few others. Eric Grace, another one that would love to have been involved with the club again in some area. But so we'll just wait and see whether that ever happens. But as far as the wrestling goes, look, I think the only way you're going to stop that is with penalties during the game. I mean, the coaches are always looking to get an edge on opposition teams. It's not. I guess it's not illegal to have a wrestling coach as part of the coaching team.
Yeah, like unfortunately, I think it's a necessary part of the game now that there is so many rules in the sense of, the scrum is definitely not what it used to be. They've gotten rid of the shoulder charge for good reason, and I agree with that. But, it's just become a matter of the only way to sort of battle for contention with the ball is wrestle / the ball strip, which even now they're looking at trying to outrule that. I think wrestling is unfortunately an integral part of the game now, and it's needed for that sort of thing. Whereas if they had not gotten rid of, making the scrum what it is now, and as in what it used to be, there wouldn't be as much wrestling needed,
I agree. They've got to, as I said, if they're going to have the wrestling as part of the game, if they're trying to stop it, well, they've got to obviously look at penalising teams for doing certain parts when they make the tackles. If they do that enough, maybe the coaches will stop because they don't want their teams penalised all the time. But I think a lot of teams, they've got to look at a lot of the rules. I generally think there is too many rules in the game.
Yes, agreed.
That's one of the things that's ruining the game. I think they need to go back, go through every rule, have a look and see what it does and what it doesn't do, and whether or not it's good or bad for the game.
Exactly, whether it's got more positive or negative effect on the game.
Exactly, get rid of it. And I think, I like some of the rules that help the attacking team, and as much as defence is a big part of rugby league, people like to see tries getting scored, and one of the rules where they said the corner posts are no longer in play. You can knock the corner post over when you're scoring a try. I think that was great because now we're seeing some spectacular wingers tries.
Oh, it's great. Honestly, it's so great.
And that's a good thing. I think the stripping the ball rule, they've got to get rid of that. I mean, we've got guys running around here, professional rugby league players earning anywhere between $200,000 and $1 million, $200,000 and $1 million a year, and we're telling the opposition they're not allowed to take the ball off him. I think, that if the guys can't hold on to the ball at this stage of their career, they're never going to be able to hold on to the ball. And I do believe it's a cause of a lot of problems around the play the ball area because obviously the coaches want quick play the balls.
Yep.
Players are wrestling to try and hold them down.
Yep.
The man with the ball trying to get himself up doesn't have hold of the ball that well, loses the ball, and then all of a sudden then we've got conjecture as to whether or not he lost it or whether it was stripped from him. Well, if there was no stripping the ball rule, you wouldn't have to worry about that.
Yep.
You just say, well, he's lost it, and save the hit. But that's the problem. They just need to, I think, change some of the rules around so we can sort of help the game progress and become better.
Yeah, for sure. I agree, honestly, with that tenfold. Next question is from Ian Rhodes, and he asks, what was it like playing for Wigan in the 1985 Cup final against Hull, which had your former teammate Peter Sterling in it? And also, a side note, Ian Rhodes was at that game and said it was one of the best games of footy he's seen in his life.
Yeah, look, that was great. I went over to Wigan. I wasn't sure what to expect. That was the first time I'd been to England to play for an English team. Obviously, was over there in '82 in the Kangaroo Tour. But very, very fortunate with Wigan. They were a very good side. Had got a lot of quality young players who I think 2 years later, a lot of them became internationals playing for Great Britain.
Yep.
But we had a good young side. We were able to get to the Challenge Cup final. It was great playing at Wembley Stadium. I'd only ever seen Wembley Stadium on TV, watching FA Cup finals the soccer.
Yep.
To actually be there was magnificent, and 100,000 people watching the game. It was just one of the best things I've ever experienced. And I obviously have never experienced anything like that again.
Yeah.
Never played in front of 100,000 people here in Australia, and so it was very special. And in a lot of ways, it was tough at times because, on the opposition team, as you said, was Peter Sterling and John Muggleton, based from Parramatta, and you knew one of us had to be in a winning team, and fortunately enough, it was for me. But you sort of felt for these other two guys because you knew how good they are, and not just as footballers but as men. And and it was disappointing to think they couldn't walk away with a cup winners medal. But that I was just glad that I was actually fortunate enough to be in the winning team. But
Yep.
certainly a great experience and something that I've always cherished and will always remember.
Wonderful. Just before we go to the last fan's question, that sort of helps me tie in the next question, which is about your accolades and your achievements during your playing time, from which you got Dally M Player of the Year, got the Golden Boot, Clive Churchill Medal. Well, back then it was, Player of the Match for the Grand Final, etc. What is your proudest achievement of your NRL career?
Oh, well, look, I guess obviously the Golden Boot Award, which was given to you as the best rugby league player in the world. So,
Yeah.
That's something that becomes very special. The funny story is that it was 1986. I arrived in England on the Kangaroo Tour, and we were at Leeds, at Headingley at Leeds home ground.
Yep.
And we were there to get some photos, team shots, and individual shots done. And as I got off the bus, a couple of guys from the Open Rugby magazine pulled me aside and told me that I'd won this Golden Boot Award, and I had no idea what it was.
Oh, wow.
I said, well, I'm thinking, when they said Golden Boot, I'm thinking, well, it's goal kicker something, and I said, well, how did I win this? I don't kick goals. And they said, no, they explained to me what it was, and
Yep.
I said, oh, that was great, It took a while to sink in, and the unfortunate thing was I couldn't tell anyone because they had to get photos for their magazine, and the presentation was done, I think, a week or two later.
Yeah.
So I couldn't tell anyone. If I was on the phone to my family back home, I couldn't say anything in case the roommate came in. So
Yeah, or it leaked or anything.
I had to keep it all to myself.
Oh, that would have been terrible.
Yeah, and then the day of the presentation, it was done at the motel we were staying at.
Yep.
And there was myself, Sterlo, and Wally Lewis were the three representatives for the Australian team. But
Yep.
do you think I could get a bet on with anyone that I'd win it? Not a chance. No one wanted to take any bets, and I thought, geez, it's the only time I knew I was a certainty.
Oh, you should have. You should have.
But it was a wonderful thing to be able to say that you, at one stage in your career, you were rated the best rugby league player in the world, and I guess you can't get any higher than that. So it was a very special day for me, and it's something that I'm very proud of.
Doing Miles, and he asks, who was the hardest and or toughest player you ever played against, whether that's for strength or, the way they played the game, etc.?
Oh, look, it's a tough question. I often say to people I was very fortunate to play in an era where there were so many great players, and
Yes.
obviously to pick one, I mean, I look at a bloke like Wayne Pearce, who's probably the toughest defensive player I've ever played against.
Yep.
And I know he got me one time there with a tackle, and it took me 10 minutes to get up. But he was one of those guys. But I guess if I had to pick one, probably Wally Lewis would be the toughest player that I've had to play against. It was always very hard playing against Wally, and probably a close second would be Terry Lamb.
Is that more so for the way they played the game, their vision? And whatnot?
just with their skill and probably, in Wally's case, probably size. He was bigger than I was, and
Yep.
he was a former lock forward, and so and their skill levels, were always good, and you knew, when I played it, you always wanted to have a nice easy game. You didn't want to have it too tough, but you knew when you played Wally Lewis it was going to be a tough day, and it was the same when I played Terry Lamb. But I'd say Wally Lewis 1 and Terry Lamb 2.
I want to thank you very much for joining us here at the Final Tackle. There is one last thing I would like to ask is there anything you would like to say to the fans listening, whether that's advice for them, life advice, sporting advice, or even if you have anything like an organisation or anything you'd like to promote or plug?
Oh, mate, look, just to everyone that was listening, I just want to say thank you to all the Parramatta fans and I guess rugby league fans in general. Throughout my career, I never really had too many hassles with the rugby league fan, and was always very much appreciated for the way I played, and I appreciate that they enjoyed what I did, and I enjoyed what I was doing, and just wanted to say thank you to everyone for what they've done and the way they treated me, and just keep following the game. It's going through some tough times, but I'm sure we'll get through to the other end, and hopefully the game will improve a bit better. And as we've already mentioned, so maybe some of the rules might need to be changed. But yeah, look, it's a great game. It was very good for me, and I just hope that everyone, sticks with their club and supports their team, whether they finish from the bottom of the table or win a premiership. All these guys are out there doing their best to get as far as they can in the game and help their club obviously win a premiership, and unfortunately it doesn't always happen. But, I'm pretty sure that all the players would appreciate the fact that the fans keep turning up week to week.
And again, once more, thank you very much for joining us here at the Final Tackle podcast. We'll be sure to get you on at some point next season as well.
Not a problem.